Alright guys, this is the one. Look at how freaking wide this tree is. This is insane. Easing my way into a spot right now. Not really expecting anything. And there's a little shed right off the bat. You can tell this is going to be a good day. But just starting out today. It's Good Friday today. That makes it the 7th. Yeah, I believe it's April 7th, 2023. And doing a long day of scouting today. Really excited for it. Awesome to have this day off of work, and I'm going to be walking literally the whole day. The driest section of the walk I've been in. Not putting my weight down there. This is just bottomless here. I'll see you guys at the end of this mess.
8 hours later.
Land. Made it to land. So I'm working a little bit backward today. Right now I'm walking the transition. I'm on a piece that has a really long access to a very small property. It's just one of those thin strips that they allow you to access on, and then you can get back into some of this area. So around this small chunk is a lot of marsh, but I've got a little bit of hardwoods, and so what I'm doing is I know that they're coming into this little patch of hardwoods early season because of how far it is away from crop fields, and I'm scouting the transition of this hardwoods, looking for things like this, big primary scrapes, big sign, trails leading out to bedding, and then I'm following it back into the bedding, where a lot of the times what I do is I work from bedding to where I can kill them. Right now I'm starting at the sign, working back because I know already they're bedding this perimeter. I'd rather not walk the swamp and the marsh and over my boots the entire time. I'd rather just walk out there when I know something is accessing the island in a place I can kill it and that it's mature from the get-go. So obviously if something is snapping off a branch this thick at my head height, it's mature. We've also got some big rubs right over here, killer scrapes leading into this. This is kind of the last point that he hits before he goes out into this marsh. I've got a little bit of land to work with that I can go out into this marsh and I can check for his bed, and I can already see on the map there's a couple little lone trees out there. So a lot of the times like this, it's blatantly obvious that this buck is making a scrape here. I mean, these branches are just destroyed. Everything is just completely limp here. He went hard on it. And he seems to be hitting this extremely often. But a lot of the times it's not this obvious, it's pretty subtle. The branch is straight, it's maybe nipped off at the end, you can see some bark chewed off, and this ground looks just like it does now. There's not really a bare patch on it. So you can identify a lot of these primary scrapes or a lot of these scrapes that are out of season right now by just checking and seeing that licking branch. Now in this case it's really obvious, so that's great. It's also telling me it's super habitual. So this is something that I would potentially, because of how far back this is, put a camera over so I know, a cell camera, so I know when this buck is hitting this, and I don't have to come back here and potentially screw it up, come a little too early or a little too late in the season, and then bump him off of that bed so he's not using it anymore. So this is going to go ahead and be my sign that it's on the one sole trail coming out from his bedding. He's probably going to hit the scrape or at least pass it. He doesn't have much of a choice but to at least pass within 10 yards of that camera. So this would be a good place to put a camera to monitor whether a buck's using a bed or not, and whether I should be targeting him right now or not. Again, you can see here how habitual this trail is. He's here often. Because of those oaks, I'm assuming he's here in the early season a lot. That's probably going to be my first good shot on him before pressure gets to him. And he starts to switch up. Starting to make it a little bit further back here. I gotta walk off of his trail most of the way. It's super wet. And you can see it's a little dry. It looks like there's ferns here. And water's a foot high right now. It's still dry here. It's a good sign. This is probably right where he's bedding. Shifting around this clump here for the wind. tree is rubbed up, snapped off, aggressive just like that scrape that's back there. All sorts of red brush here. Could browse on during the day. It's another bed right here. Key to look at. Got nipped off ends right here. You guys can see that. They're all nipped off. This is what a clean end looks like. So everything out of his head view is clean. Almost anything in it is nipped off. That's the bed. He's probably just gonna shift around here, depending on the wind. There's a bed there. This is it. This is the one. In his bed here are pretty damn big pellets. Look at that compared to the size of my thumb. That's what a big buck pellet looks like. They won't always poop a bigger size or clumped up or whatever, like a lot of people think. But those pellets, I found, are a decent correlation between it being a mature buck and it not. It has smaller pellets. All right, let's get a little breakdown of this. So right now, I'm sitting in this buck's bed. I can really tell that this is a buck's bed in particular. One, the intelligence of it. A lot of time there's not a lot of sign around the Kingpin buck's bed if there's not much competition for him. He's got no reason to really be signaling to does because it's in his bed. Does and he aren't gonna wanna be around there, so he's not doe rubbing. And he's got no reason to be rubbing a whole lot if he's the Kingpin and nothing's really challenging him. So everything pretty much knows by his interdigital scent or the scent he's leaving in the rubs far away or on the scrapes nearby that this is his area. He doesn't need to rub much. That being said, he will clear out his area, make sure he's comfortable. So you can tell he's browsing on some of this red brush here. Like I showed earlier, a lot of that stuff's nipped off. Right here, you can see that this main branch that was in his way, all this stuff is just hanging loose now. He snapped that off. He's still not making rubs, but he's snapping all this stuff off. And he's got plenty of room to move around with a big old cage on his head. So as you can see, I'm 5'11" for reference, I'm 200 pounds. And I got lots of space in here. This deer can lay around, shift around depending on the wind. He can bump around the edges of this cover, and he can smell pretty much wherever someone could come from on any wind and still be comfortable and have plenty of room in here and have security all around him and escape routes in multiple directions. So from that kind of intelligence, you can definitely tell it's a mature buck bed. He's got poop in the bed, poop around it. Oftentimes a big buck won't move very far in daylight, so they'll just stand up and poop. I actually have some video of that in the hill country. Not a very mature buck, but it would just get up, poop, walk 2 yards and lay back down. And it did that for a few hours, just 40 yards from me. So he's definitely using this area, he's using it habitually. There's green growth around it, but there's not growth in here. So he's kind of keeping this matted down really well. Stuff's staying dead in here because he's laying on it so often. I can tell that there's ferns around here, so it's gonna be green up on the low cover. It's gonna be really green around him. And there's a little bit of browse in here so he can kind of chew on stuff throughout the day until he really wants to feed at the end of the day. I haven't made a super correlation between this yet. I don't know for fact if this is completely accurate, but there's long and short hairs in here. So there's belly hair that's super long in here. That's like you're 4 inches long. And there's belly hair in here that's like 2 inches and shorter. So to me, the theory is that shorter hair is from earlier in the season, that longer hair is from later in the season. What I think's going on is he's bedding here in the early season. He's got water all around him, so it's a little bit cooler here. But he's bedding here when the shade is on. So when there's a lot of leaves on this red brush here, he's bedding here. So he's able to sit here in the shade. Well, later in the season, those food sources that he's going to are on the other exit trail that I didn't come in on, going away from this island and towards an ag field about a half-mile away. He might bed here when the sun is hitting him in the late season because that's warmth. It's a little bit of a dry area despite there being water around here. And I think he's using it when that ice is thick enough for him to safely travel on versus when it's really thin and he's kind of starting to break through, which is why I don't think he's used it super recently here. But the main indicators to me is the food source on his exit trail, and his most consistent trail going out is oaks. I think he's going to be here in the early season because of that. I think he's making it there in daylight because, one, it's not extremely far. It's less than 100 yards. And two, I don't think there's enough in this local area to kind of sustain his appetite until the end of the day. I think he's going to make it to that nearest oak tree just about shooting closing. And the reason I also think it's early season is because he's going to want leaf cover in here, especially if it were rut or something like that. He's going to want leaf cover and shade still. So he's going to want that extra concealment. He doesn't want that sun beating down on him unless it's the frigid portions of the year. And you can tell it's just an intelligent spot. This is where a big buck's going to be. And I feel very confident that I'm at least going to see and hopefully kill a mature buck that bedded in this area and goes right towards that scrape I showed you guys earlier. I have very, very high confidence that if something doesn't get screwed up by another hunter, which is very possible, I'll have an encounter with a mature buck that beds right here. So I'm going to mark this in my OnX. I'm going to note what wind it's on, what direction he's traveling. I'm going to end that track and make sure I show that that's where that buck is traveling from and where he's arriving to. And I'm going to move on and find another bedding area. Something else I want to note to kind of speak to the importance of e-scouting is right now I'm exactly 10 yards from where I marked my location for possible bedding e-scouting. Find like it's pretty easy in these marshes to identify right where that kingpin's bedding if you really know what you're doing, if you know how to identify the pressure and how those bucks get away from it. So in this case, like many, I was very, very close, and this is something that is going to help you eliminate a lot of your time. So try e-scouting, especially if you're not certain of a property before you head into it. Just can't stop finding the big ones today. Look at that, really sun bleached. That no shed this year, but really early on. Sweet. Still got deer working these scrapes. Not a bad track. I think it's probably a large doe, but scrapes everywhere here. Alright guys, this is the one. Look at how freaking wide this tree is. This is insane. He's knocking this tree way behind it too. And the average height on that rub is waist high. And he's downhill of that right there. This is crazy. And this is directly in his bed. He's actually been bedding in it recently. There's hair everywhere, poop everywhere, everything is super worn down. I'll show you afterward. Now this rub is from last season. And he must have some pretty crazy brow tines because he's not even really digging in right here. That's like mostly just his forehead hitting right there. Wow. That is just crazy. So you can actually see if you look really close, there's mildew in this rub here. So I can tell it's probably from early season. It's not looking super aggressive. There aren't rubs on a bunch of the trees around here, but it's just enough to kind of mark that this is his spot. There's hair in this bed everywhere. Hair from recent, hair from a while ago. This is crazy. He's just sitting here all the time. This is like what you hope and pray that you find when you go scouting. Let me give you guys a closer look at this. Look at just hair, recent hair. There's poop everywhere. Bunch of hair here, hair here, bunch of hair, poop. This is just incredible. And this is watching where people access the marsh. I don't think there's any way to really get close to him here. Maybe a morning sit where you beat him in by hours. That's all I can think of. This is just nuts. Holy cow. Kind of in shock here. So I've been looking for a deer of this caliber for a while. Found some stuff that looked great, but nothing has looked quite this special. This is gonna be a really, really, really hard deer to hunt. I'm gonna try and figure it out. Got to get going here soon, unfortunately, so we'll see what I can do.